Good evening, my friends. Thank you for watching this video, or at least the first couple seconds here. We have a special edition of Thursday Night Life Music tonight, in that there will be no music, or it will be storytelling and fables, and you can bring your own music, I guess. But I think the cadence and the pace of Jodi Swanson's voice will also be, excuse me, musical in itself. So that's what's happening tonight. Jodi Swanson will be on the program, Thursday Night Life Music for February 25th, 2021. And just in, actually, for folks that might be interested, March 31st is Herb Alpert's 86th birthday this year. And I'm a big admirer of Herb's work, not only as being a musician, but also being a visual artist. And I got permission from his people to do a celebration. So on March 29th at the Fulton Street Collective, Chad McCulloch is gonna do a thing. Pretty amazing. He's gonna play his band. We still have to talk about some of the details, but he's gonna do a thing, and I'm gonna live paint. We're gonna celebrate the music of Herb Alpert, and it's gonna be 2 days before his birthday, but it means we can use it for the next day and his actual birthday on the 31st. That is just in. Fulton Street Collective, of course, is a fantastic space that I've been working with for years. I've got a studio there. I was there last night working with Roy McGrath. That was a benefit. That's going on, meaning please chime in and benefit Fulton Street Collective. And there's a painting I did last night. I'll give you some more information, but y'all can bid on that. All right, let's see if we can get Jodi going here. I'm seeing that you're unable to join, so I'm going to... Jodi, if you can see this, I'm getting an indication that you are unable to join. I'm not sure what that means. Let me dialogue with Jodi. Let me pause this for a second. See folks. Jodi, I'll try again to invite you. I don't know why it says you're unable to join. Let's try this. I guess I can sign off, delete this video, and we could try again. That's always the thing. Oh, wait. Folks, I think it's going to happen. Hey!
Hi!
How you doing, lady?
I'm good. I was wondering if maybe it was giving me that because I was trying to join on my laptop, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
So
I decided to add some mood, give you a little fire.
Nice, very cool. Oh, that's great.
Right?
So you've got the fire. I still have the Christmas lights going.
Hey, that's all right. My Christmas lights go year round. I have that
house, right?
I'm like gonna be enjoying this for what it's worth. So let me ask this: are you feeling the mood for anything in particular? Or are you just gonna kind of go off what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's my plan. My default here is to flow, like sort of hanging out, and we're on a raft on the water, and kind of like wherever you want to take us.
Like a gondola.
Yeah, right. It's just sort of, wherever you go.
I mean, the idea is I can, first off, to everybody watching, I am okay. Whenever they hear me write, they think like my life is really sad because I write a lot of sad stuff. I'm fine. I'm doing good. So nobody has to check on me. But I'm thinking if it strikes your mood, Maybe I'll start with something that just starts to talk a little bit about me and what started my journey. I decided tonight, you can go ahead and get started, Lewis, and I'm just going to
That's cool. Yeah, yeah.
ramble.
Right here, right? So right, a blank canvas. It's potential. We both have no idea what's going to happen in the next hour. That's part of the fun.
That's for sure. Are we going a whole hour? That's a lot.
No, we don't have to go the whole hour, actually, no.
If we read a whole hour in Jodi's journal, that's a whew.
But I know that when you and I get going, it could be
I know.
we want. So
You off each other very well together. For people who don't know Lewis, he did a live drawing of Jan and I when we did our TEDx together, which was really quite amazing. So,
right.
All right. Do we need music, Lewis?
I was thinking like the actual like cadence of your voice.
We'll do it.
And the crackle of the fire could be,
Oh, can't really see the fire. All right. Well, I'm going to start with one. One of the things I like about this is that I don't really have to say who these are about or what they're about. I have a series of journals, and I'm going to start with one I wrote 2 nights ago that really kind of explains everything else, I guess, in my own cryptic way. So you ready, Lewis?
All right. Take it away, Jodi.
Okay. I hate to read, but I have 2 books coming out this year. Let me adjust. Oh. But I have 2 books coming out this year. I'm not sure how many books I've read, not that many to be honest, but I love them and they are everywhere and they fill my house. The first book I remember holding was the Bible. The first story I fell in love with was Song of Solomon, probably because it was poetry. May he kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for his expressions of endearment are better than wine. His left hand is under my head and his right hand would caress me. But maybe not just because it was poetic, but also because it was erotic and it was in the Bible. My dear one is to me a light bag of myrrh, spending the night between my breasts. Or I have taken off my robe, how can I put it back on? His mouth is sweetness itself, and everything about him is desirable. It was then I started filling my world with poetry books and everything to do with love. It was love that made me stop one day and pick up a black and white Paris calendar in the mall. I saved up for it. And when I got it, I studied it in a way I had no idea I was fine-tuning my photographic eye that was about to come. At that point, I needed books with great poetry, but now they had to have great photography. I read them and dreamed so vividly, but I knew all the images in those were only a dream. And while I was dreaming, I remember the clicks of my mother's typewriter, staying in touch with all her friends that she hadn't seen in decades. All her letters were stories, really. She loved to read them to me. She bought me a notepad to take to a religious convention. I showed up the next day without it, because the night before, the paper called my pen harder than anything I had ever known. I wrote about pain. I wrote poetry. I wrote about my sister's lonely hurt. A woman's lonely pain. That notebook, that calendar, Song of Solomon, all brought me to create the unending complex project that is my heart that finally has freedom to beat at last. All right, so that really explains a lot about my journey of women of strength, my love of poetry. When I first started writing, that very notebook my mother got me is this one here, and there is the very first entry, and I filled all the pages full.
Wow.
Not the best writing. I was young. I filled my little spaces here with random note cards. So I'll read you random quotes from people that I love, from Roald Dahl, a person who has good thoughts cannot ever be ugly. You can have a wonky nose and a crooked mouth and a double chin and stick out teeth. But if you have good thoughts, they will shine out of your face like sunbeams and you will always look lovely.
I like that.
Thank you, Louis. All right. Here's another one that I wrote. These next two I wrote just last night. I seem to write better when I have a pen in my hand, so I don't know why. I was talking to a friend last night about textures. As I watch Louis paint, I bring this to mind. I told them we are a texture ourselves, the fluid of our tears, the bumps in our skin, the wind of our breath. I decide to pause and look around me, to see the textures of the not so obvious. I quickly fell upon the textures of love, that locking stare between two people where you feel like you give yourself away, the texture of the taste on your tongue, the warmth of their presence or the sting of their absence. The texture of love quickly brought me to the texture of hate, and the texture of hate was all jagged, empty, and bruised. And so my quote in between pauses is from Alex Noble. If I have been of service, if I have glimpsed more of the nature and essence of ultimate good, if I am inspired to reach wider horizons of thought and action, if I am at peace with myself, it has been a successful day. All right. And this one I also wrote last night. Who knew I would be grateful for the fiction that was us? A heart crushed that every promise was a fantasy, a heart crushed that when it was time to show up on my doorstep, my welcome mat was empty. Long little locks and bouncing curls slowly faded in the distance. The vision I had of her turned away when you said, "Isn't it fun just to dream?" Maybe, I guess. Actually, not really. As she faded from my mind, so did you, and as my wounded heart healed and clarity came back to me, I paused for a moment to look back and see if I missed what we really were, and who knew I'd never be so grateful for fiction. Okay, and my pause in between there. This is an anonymous quote. There is no time to be bored in a world as beautiful as this. And that is so true. The one thing I tell my son Lincoln is he's never allowed to tell me he is bored, because we have a mind and he's creative and I'm just never bored.
And sometimes boredom is a good space to be into, you know? Like, I like to call it idle time. You know? As in, like, this is a good time to let thoughts come to you as opposed to you manufacturing something.
No, that's so true. I actually was speaking to a group of college students today, and I was telling them how when you're creative, you should never be bored. And one of the things I think we don't have anymore is the fact that we can sit. We used to be able to sit in the back of the car when we go on those road trips to Florida, and we'd have to stare out the window. We didn't have a phone, and I got car sick, and I hated to read. So I had no option but to look out the window and create in my mind all the things that, I don't know, I would come up with. But I didn't know I was an artist till I was 38. But I guess I was an artist all along. But once I guess I defined myself, I suddenly made a lot more sense to myself. And I guess I don't really make sense, but somehow it all made sense. So
I like to keep it slightly undefined.
Yeah.
Meaning, okay, yeah, I've labeled myself as an artist, blah, blah, blah. That's been for quite a while. But isn't it nice for someone else to sort of bring something novel to the conversation and say, oh, hey, you're an architect or something, or, you know, you're some kind of different kind of poet.
Yeah.
I'm always outside inspiration, you know?
Well, what's so interesting is when I was talking to these students today, I said, you know, the thing I never realized is collaboration, the beauty, like this, I would have never imagined the way we would have collaborated. And Jan Maxon, who was the cello player in our TEDx talk, I mean, I didn't even listen to classical music. And he's like, hey, let's collaborate. What am I supposed to do? And once you really kind of open your mind up to the fact that you can pretty much collaborate with anything, it's the cliche line, the world is your oyster, but it's so true. And you and I are also collaborating on a project, Frosty the Snowman, that is still in the works, maybe for next winter. But there's certain artists who feed really well off each other. And, you know, magic just happens.
Right.
So this one is a little bit darker. Again, I'm okay. You are a critique I didn't ask for, a critique I didn't sign up for, one that lingers long after you're gone. Hours, days, weeks, months, even years, your critiques haunt me. I hear them in the mirrors and standing before myself, sitting in my reflection and searching to love myself and not to be embarrassed of myself. You are a bad person, these reflections said. You are a bad person. Through their words never spoke, through their sheer silence and avoidance of me. You are a bad person, echoed through the chambers of my mind. And no matter how much beauty I try to sprinkle in this earth, their silence slowly takes the color away. So that's a little bit darker one. I'm leaving all commentary out of that. So
But there, sometimes it's for somebody else, you know.
sometimes. That one is more of a group setting than a person, but yeah. Here's one I read at the Green Mill on the open mic poetry slam. Figuring out myself, I guess. No one understands her crazy head, minister's daughter, raised on a farm. Sounds a lot like Footloose if you ask me. I won't even mention that she dances too. No one understands her crazy head. She sits in that corporate circus all day only to make some really dark art in the middle of the night, so she can pretend to survive the keyboard clicks and pushing pencils the next day. No one understands her crazy head when she runs away to a place in the middle of the desert that resembles what she was taught is a lot like Sodom and Gomorrah. No one understands her crazy head, that this dirty, gross place freed her, and just maybe the darkness of her art didn't need to stay in the dark no more. No one understands her crazy head and all the puzzle pieces that don't fit. No one understands her crazy head, not even her, not even me. So my little card in between is run, my dear, from anything that may not strengthen your precious budding wings. Run like hell, my dear, from anyone likely to put a sharp knife into the sacred, tender vision of your beautiful heart. Read that one more time because it's so good. Run, my dear, from anything that may not strengthen your precious budding wings. Run like hell, my dear, from anyone likely to put a sharp knife into the sacred, tender vision of your beautiful heart. There are many beautiful hearts that unfortunately get broken by people who zap their energy. This is a poem. This is going way back. This is kind of a saucy one. This is back in the late 90s. I wrote this, and I'll give the backstory on this. So I went to a wedding. I have 3 older sisters. I went to a wedding, and there was this man there that my sister had a crush on when she was younger, and he would never give her the time of day. And he was at this wedding with somebody, and when my sister walked in the door, she stopped him in his tracks. And he never said anything to her, but I wrote this poem because of that. I am the woman of your dreams. Our eyes meet for the first time in a while. I sit back and watch our eyes meet from a distance, and I sit back and watch your lady friend charm you. She may have your arm, but I have your mind. You won't even talk to me. Your facade says that I'm a memory you'd rather not have, and yet catch a peek as if glancing the room. You smile in her eyes. You look at her with the thought to vow your life, and yet I'm the woman of your dreams. I'm the woman who occupies your thoughts. You give your life to her, but your mind was given to me. You may dance with her and kiss her, but I'm the one you dance with in your dreams, and when you close your eyes to kiss her, it is the image of me that sweeps across your mind. Saucy.
A little bit of spice.
Little bit of spice. I'm trying to not be too spicy. I have some really spicy ones when I go spicy. But I am a mom. Okay.
Your mom. And,
what?
Right. Well, we could that would be like the midnight show.
Yeah, we'll do the midnight saucy show. I'm all right with that. I love it.
You started with Song of Solomon, and that's
I did.
sauce right there.
That was I learned it from the Bible. It was my religious upbringing.
I remember discovering that at Haycock Camp, which is kind of like the Christian Boy Scouts, you know, and being like, this is right in here. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, I know. Like, my fire's not showing. We gotta give you guys some mood. I know. You know, it's so interesting because my dad would speak to thousands of people, and when I was young, at age 7, I was in front of a crowd of like 23,000 people. But I remember listening to my dad, and I think there was this one young kid that had to get up and read a Song of Solomon about how her breasts were like gazelles running through, you know. And I felt so bad for him, but then I was like, wow, what is this stuff, you know? And every time when I was in church and they thought I was listening and reading my Bible, I was actually rereading Song of Solomon and writing poetry in my Bible. So that's why I go to Burning Man. Explains a lot about me now. Here's another anonymous one. There are some people who will always seem angry and continuously look for conflict. Walk away from these people. The battle they're fighting isn't with you. It's with themselves. That's good.
that's good.
You know, I'm going to jump to this. This is kind of a fun memory from 2016. I went to Victoria. Have you ever been to Victoria?
Canada.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it's beautiful. You should go there. Hop's a little ferry. And went there in 2016. And, you know, I have a long journey being raised in a, you know, household with a father that's a minister. And I was baptized at 13 years old. And for much of my life, that was like one of the most important baptism dates of my life. And it symbolized baptizing myself in. I was with a friend and we were walking in this park and saw these kids, well, they were like in their 20s, skinny dipping at the bottom of a waterfall. And, you know, the water was pretty cold, right? And so on a whim, I decided that after they left, I was going to go skinny dipping at the base of the waterfall. And, you know, mostly skinny dipping. And jumped into this water at the bottom of this like enormous waterfall. And I had no idea how liberating that would be. But this entry here, I have an entry that I have a new baptism date. And this date is basically my baptism date into my freedom to be myself, to look out for myself, to love myself, to be precious with myself. I think so often we associate baptism with religion, and maybe it's not so bad to associate baptism with who we want to be, whatever that may mean. I love what you're doing, Louis. I love all the colors.
Thank you. I was actually thinking I wasn't going to do any kind of portrait, and again, like, I don't make, and whenever I make plans, that's when it goes like, oh yeah, okay, well,
whatever.
I'm gonna do what I want to do.
I'm gonna have my way with you. So, anyways, I'm gonna read kind of a funny one. This is into a world that many people don't know about. I'm actually gonna touch on religion a little bit more. So I was raised, well, I'll just read it. If I can find it. I took some courses at Second City, okay. And I performed this one in a storytelling class. And this is a little bit, this is kind of funny. This is kind of an inside view of what it was like to be raised like me. Jodi, wear your boots, my mother says to my 17-year-old self one April morning. Boots weren't cute back then. I had enough dork going on that I didn't need to help it out at all. I was raised one of Jehovah's Witnesses, which meant we would go door to door every weekend. But because I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin, that meant door to door was more like farmhouse to farmhouse. This particular Saturday, my father volunteered to drive the Suburban, and two of the cool kids were in there. We always knew when people faked being home. So when another lady and I were walking down the hill to the Suburban, I hit a patch of ice in my cute flats, and my mother's words of "wear your boots, Jodi" were now haunting me. I skidded on my feet a full 10 feet until I slammed into the Suburban with a full side face plant. And then, before I had time to blink, I found myself hanging from the door handles of my father's Suburban. My right hand on the front handle and my left hand on the back. And because my dad had parked at an angle on the hill, my butt couldn't touch the ground, and my legs were spread open like a broken Barbie doll in the attic. This now is the point where I look back and forth to find the woman I was with. I don't hear her, and I now wonder if she has fallen for some reason. The reason I do not hear her is because she has lost all oxygen due to the fact she's laughing so hard and bent over, trying to stop herself from peeing her pants, or should I say her dress. I should probably point out that once again, I'm 17. I'm a 17-year-old that has never worked out, and oh my God, is it hard to hold your body weight up. At this point, I am wondering where all the people are in the car and why they aren't helping me. I mean, it's not like they didn't see me. I body slammed the Suburban and my face slid down the window like they were rolling it up on me, but just faster, a lot faster. Later, the cool kid said that he looked out the opposite window to see if I slid out the other side, and since he didn't see me, he didn't think anything was wrong. Yes, let's just leave the flat-shoed dork laying under the car. I am still hanging there, and I'm still dying, and no one is helping me because they have their own thing going on, and somehow my dad completely missed it. This is when I start to feel something wet on my ankle. Turns out the farm had a farm dog. Who knew? It is starting to sniff up my leg, and I am in a dress. This is where my exhaustion turns into panic. I'm worried this dog is either going to bite me, mate with me, or pee on me, and I start to kick my legs to find traction. Zero to be found. In attempt to kick up, I hurt both of my knees because they hit the undercarriage of the Suburban. I think we need to pause here for a moment to remember one key character in this story. The people in their home pretending to not be home. I mean, what a dilemma playing out in their front yard. It makes hiding very hard because who doesn't want to see the end of this circus act? I can imagine the conversation. Should we help her? But then we'd have to talk to them. Yes, let her hang. This may very well be my first memory of finding strength beyond what I knew I was capable of. And I pulled my body up with only my strength. To this day, it is still the one and only pull-up I have ever done in my life. That's a little whimsical one.
Jodi, if you could do it all over again, meaning if you could be raised in a different way that you would choose now that you're an adult, would you, or would you let it be?
I would still want to be raised the same way.
Yeah.
I get a lot of questions about it. You know, it's one of those things. I had a great childhood, you know, being raised one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I'll always have people be like, "Oh, you didn't get holidays, and you didn't get any birthdays, you poor thing," you know. And it's kind of like, if we had to imagine a holiday somewhere else that we don't really know about, and somebody coming up to us and saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry you don't celebrate this holiday," but it's like I didn't miss the holiday because I never celebrated it. Right. But on the flip side, I now invent all my own holidays, which is way more fun and meaningful. And my parents are in love, like for real in love. And they always made a big deal out of their anniversary. And, you know, their anniversary was similar to Christmas for me. My dad built a grandfather clock out of sheet metal, and he had that in the living room, and my parents would put presents around the grandfather clock for all of us, and we would celebrate their love. And so for me, I was always kind of perplexed why people celebrated Christmas when they could celebrate love. And maybe that's why I've written about love so much and everything else. But yeah, I wouldn't trade it. I mean, am I a witness now? No. But I had a great childhood. And, you know, it led to all my giving back. For 5 years, we went through Iowa and volunteered. And we lived in the homes for a weekend at a time every month for families when we were volunteering, doing work. And that's where a lot of it comes from for me. So with my son, you know, he's ready. I'm going to be doing a volunteer trip in the Bahamas. And I talked to the person I'm going to be seeing, and I think I might bring him with. I think it's time. So and by the way, that's how I ended up becoming a public speaker, you know, so.
I mean, it's a little like missionary work.
Yeah.
In a sense, you know.
Yeah.
In the part that I can relate, I grew up fundamentalist Christian, you know, and I'm still down with a lot of stuff. I'm Anglican right now, and through the Lutheran thing, which that just makes me want to be on time for everything. But that's the thing. Sort of like, you know, early is on time and on time is late. Sorry, I can't get that out of my head. But anyway, I don't know, the spiritual aspect of things, that even though there was a lot of rules about it early on, you know, now that I'm an adult who tends to sort of like reinforce rules, you know, and am a creator in some ways, I see the value to some of that structure.
Yeah.
You know, as much as I'm a free spirit and hey, let's all just let it all hang out, and you know what I'm talking about. I mean, even Burning Man, there's like, okay, but there's also like certain security to like, here are what the ancients have said, what the rules are. Let's understand them. I tend to break rules also too sometimes. You know, that's part of what's nice about those things. But it's also about being a dad, and you know what I'm talking about. You know, being a mom, it's like, here's the world. You know, we're doing a lot of poetry. I have on my Zizova shirt, which is you know, the poetry magazine out of the Bay Area. And so when I lived there, I remember visiting City Lights bookstore and picking up poetry books, even the sort of tattered paperback ones. I bring that up because Lawrence Ferlinghetti just passed away, who sort of set that up. And I don't know where I'm going here, but the value of abstract language, mix that in with, here are the rules, here's the way to break them, here's the way to keep them.
Yeah.
Like there's a song and dance about all that beautiful stuff that it's like, okay, the word art is so much bigger than just,
I know.
let's make ourselves feel better. It's more like
Essentially.
you know,
Yeah.
doing, you know.
I know. Exactly. I'm going to grab this one actually. Oops. I have so many journals, so many books full of writings. This one, since you bring that up, I'm going to read this. It's about my grandma. You know, there's two I wrote about my grandma that were really profound. The first time I experienced what abuse was, physical abuse, I wrote about my grandma. And I ended up being alone with her when she died. And it's interesting because I wasn't really prepared for it. My mom called me on the phone at work one day and she couldn't talk, and she just said, "It's grandma." And I said, "Is it okay?" And she's like, "No." And she couldn't say any other word. And I said, "Do you need me to go?" And she said, "Yes." And so I drove 3 hours through a snowstorm, and I made it an hour and a half before my grandma passed away. But I wrote this. She died in my arms. She died gazing into my eyes. And knowing I was there, she died in my arms, and I couldn't let her go. She died in my arms, and I held her. I held her so tight. And I cried out in sheer pain to God, and I still couldn't let her go. But what bothers me most is I know she could see my pain, and I know she could feel it. And in her last moments, I know she just wanted my pain to go away and not hers. But that experience with her really changed my viewpoint of death and handling it. And yeah, my only grandparent I ever knew, because they all passed away before I was born. Here's a favorite from of mine. Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act just once with beauty and courage. Perhaps everything that frightens us is, in its deepest essence, something helpless that wants our love. Rainer Maria Rilke.
Oh yeah.
This, like this journal, this guy's got this is pages and pages and pages. This one has, that one I'd be okay burning. Okay.
You would have an old-fashioned art burn, you just let me know. Every once in a while, and I need to do that.
I did. I actually, the last TEDx, you bring up a good comment. So the last TEDx had a variety show after it, and I spoke in that. And I actually spoke about doing that. So it was really about when you look across the glass at whoever it is that believes the opposite of you. And I talk about being raised in a glass box and how in order to reject the box, I would take my clothes off and press my body up against it. And when I looked outside of it, the pain for me was so deep that I didn't realize I took my fist and hit the glass wall. And when I hit the glass wall, it's like time stopped because I realized what I had done. I realized that I made the noise, that I was breaking out, and I turned back and I looked at all the people who loved me. And I knew our urgency was all the same yet different. My urgency was to break through, and their urgency was to catch me before I did. And so I beat the glass and I beat the glass, and as I fall through the glass, all of the shards of my stories break in through my skin. And right as I'm about to hit the ground and break through, I'm caught. And I realize when I look back, I'm caught by my mother. And we're on both sides of the glass. And I realize in that moment that I can't expect her to step through that glass to me, because she spent her whole life building that beautiful glass box for me. It is what she believes. It is what she fought for. It's what her mother fought for. And yet I know at the same time, I can't go back through that glass wall into the box, because I know where I need to be. And the two of us holding each other's hands make the active choice to let go. And so in saying that, my parents had a farm up until about 1.5 years ago. They had to sell it because my dad got macular degeneration.
Yeah.
My mom calls me up and she says, Jodi, she says, we need you to come to the farm. There's an old trunk that you have to sort through. And immediately my heart stopped, because that old trunk is memories that I want to avoid. Those are memories of pain, memories of what that exact journal is that I said I'd be okay getting rid of. And my first thought was just burn it. And so I said, yeah, I'll come up. And so I thought to myself, should I sort through this? And as I thought about that trunk, my anxiety filled. I hadn't even opened. It was actually like this box. Mom goes, I took it out of the trunk and I put it in a box. And as I thought about the box, I wasn't even touching it. I wasn't even looking at it. And as I thought about it, the pain of every possible thing that could be in there, it wasn't worth maybe a happy memory I would find in there. My anxiety filled and filled and filled. So on the very last day on the farm, my parents were gone and I was there, and I started a fire and I told my dad what I was going to do. And when I walked out of the house, he's like, this is for you. And it was some matches and a can of gasoline. And I went down and I started the fire. Good, I was a farm girl and learned how to start fires. I started the fire and I looked at the top of the box and there were my divorce papers on the top. And I was like, you know what? I can't look anymore. And I just took the box and I dumped it. And I sat there. I did a photo shoot of myself. And I processed, like, whew, it's hard for me to talk about. I processed all the pain that was in that box, because there was a time in my life where I quit my job on a Monday morning and I drove across the country to California, and I didn't tell anybody where I was, and a lot of people were really worried about me. And I got letters and letters and letters, people trying to save me. And many of those letters were from my mom. And as I dumped that box, I saw those letters go by. I saw journals go by. And I just let it burn. And it's probably one of the most cathartic experiences I've ever had with fire. But then when it was done, I collected my ashes from the fire. I call them my ashes. And I went out and I spread them in the pasture. And instead of taking a piece of the farm with me, I left a piece of me there. And probably like 8 years ago or so, there was a woman in my parents' church that passed away, and her kids were not of the same religion, and they came to my parents' house to pick up some of her stuff. And they looked out at my dad's farm, and they looked at each other, and then they came to my dad and said, in our mother's will, she requested that her ashes get spread in a pasture. And so her name was Doris Diedrich. They just did a little slab of concrete and said, this is for Doris. And I went out and I spread my ashes by Doris. And it said, Doris, she was quite the woman. And that was my story of, you know, saying goodbye to what I needed to say goodbye to. So as it relates to burning, I have a big relationship with that. And I hear you, Lewis, and I respect that. And when it's time to burn, maybe I'll come burn and you can do some live drawing at the same time.
Yeah, when you think about it too, the spiritual significance of fire, and you know, if we're going back to the sort of the good book, it's in there all the time. It's either, you know, the
Oh, yeah.
you know, it's like it's the speaking, you know, it's the bush, it's something that you can look at, but it's not God, you know, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's all in there. I've got a whole concept of how I would like the process to happen in terms of, like, you know, when I'm not, when it's just my body and stuff like that. We get into that in a different thing, but it's also like who cares? You know, part of it is very much like, I don't know, I guess I was younger, so let's treat my body like the final art piece, you
Right?
know?
Yeah.
Something.
Talking to in the Bahamas, actually, she is a sailor, and she said one time that she was sailing through a storm that was so bad, she goes, I just kind of want to go out cool. And she goes, I was thinking to myself, well, this would this would be that way.
Right. Yeah. But that's the sort of ego involved in that too. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
hey, I love it to be, you know, I'm standing up in a boat and a shark just sort of like doesn't arc and sort of like devours and goes down. Like, that's a great story, you know. But
Yeah, exactly.
unless you're Hunter S. Thompson, I guess. But
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. Here's no, I think the other one I was gonna read. This is from long ago, but this was, again, a sad moment in my life. Imagine that. I feel like I'm it's because people are like, gosh, you have so much sadness in your life, but I'm like really quite. It gets into that book from Alain de Botton about artist therapy and contrast comparison. How sometimes if you're around a lot of sadness, you're better able to recognize beauty, and if you're around a lot of beauty, you're able to recognize sadness, or the ugliness of our world, I should say. The ugliness of our world shines through even, I think, harder if we are surrounded by a lot. So I'm also going to read that. But here is, oh boy, I don't think I'm going to read that one. All right, so I was in Paris when the terrorist attacks happened, and I wrote this the night before that happened, and it was my first time to Paris. I never quite imagined that the first time I saw the Eiffel Tower, I would be alone. I studied the photography of Paris my whole life, the way most little girls dream of their wedding day. I romanticized Paris, imagining the streets filled with endless embraces, endless kisses, and envious love. Yet moments ago, I saw a young girl drop her pants in the street to go potty, while her mother sat on the corner with her money cup. This was this child's normal. She did it without hesitation. So here I sit in a little cafe in the most romantic city, alone, with my journal and camera. And the only pity that overwhelms me is not one of self-pity, but the pity for the little girl who lives in the most romantic city. And the only love she gets shown is the one that doesn't even offer to take her off a busy intersection for her to find even the smallest portion of self-value in what should be a private moment. Oh, this one. This is the one I was going to read. So this, I've had to rebuild myself from the bottom twice in my life. And the first time, well, both hard, different types of hard. But this is from the first one. From here, I start over. From here, I move on. And this is the point in my life where I change. I learn to become a better person, and I learn to be good to myself. And I become wiser, not because it just happened, but because I choose to. There have been days I've gone to heaven, and some days took me straight to hell. It sucked, but unfortunately it took hell that made me see my days of heaven, and now when heaven happens, I know it, and I enjoy it. Still true. And we're already coming up to the top of the hour here, so I'm going to end with one poem that is my life's motto.
Okay.
So a little story here. So I carried this around for 10 years along with 2 postcards. This is a good story, actually. So I carried it around with 2 postcards, and for some reason I never checked. There were photos on the postcards. Who did the postcards? And one was by Dwayne Michaels, and it was a black and white photo of 2 people hugging each other, and on the photo it said, "This is my proof that there was a time that we loved each other." And then the second postcard was a photo that I always said, you know, if I ever do photography, that is exactly the way I want to take photos. And I carried it with me with this for 10 years. And I was sitting in a photography class at a little non-for-profit down the street, and the teachers will always cycle through photos. And I'm sitting there, and this photo comes up. And I carried for 10 years. This is 15 years later. And I'm like stunned. And it occurred to me in that moment that I never flipped the postcard over to see who took the photo, because I bought this in Minnesota, up in Rochester. And I raised my hand and I asked the teacher, I said, "Can you tell me who took this photo?" And he looked at me really bizarre and he goes, "Well, I did." And I started bawling in class because I studied this photo for 10 years, and it's like, if I ever take photos, that's exactly the way I want to take photos. He didn't know what was wrong with me, of course. And I explained it later to him. But a year later, I ran into him down the street at a festival, and he said, "You know that photo?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, I have a print of it, and it belongs to you." So in my house, I have Stephen Gross. I have his photo, and I have the postcard of the photo I carry with me right next to it. So with that, I share this poem that is basically my anthem, my Bible. And I just ran into somebody the other day who knew it, actually a girl from Bahamas. But this is my Bible, my anthem of everything I am, everything I believe in, and basically every type of person I want to welcome into my life. This is called The Invitation by Oriah Mountain Dreamer. It doesn't interest me what you do for a living. I want to know what you ache for, and if you dare to dream of meeting your heart's longing. It doesn't interest me how old you are. I want to know if you will risk looking like a fool for love, for your dreams, for the adventure of being alive. It doesn't interest me what planets are squaring your moon. I want to know if you have touched the center of your own sorrow, if you have been opened by life's betrayals or have become shriveled and closed from fear of further pain. I want to know if you can sit with pain, mine or your own, without moving to hide it, fade it, or fix it. Excuse me. I want to know if you can be with joy, mine or your own. If you can dance with wildness and let ecstasy fill you to the tips of your fingers and toes without cautioning us to be careful, to be realistic, to remember the limitations of being human. It doesn't interest me if the story you're telling me is true. I want to know if you can disappoint another to be true to yourself. If you can bear the accusation of betrayal and not betray your own soul. If you can be faithless and therefore trustworthy. I want to know if you can see beauty, even when it's not pretty, every day. And if you can source from your own life its presence. I want to know if you can live with failure, yours and mine, and still stand on the edge of the lake and shout to the silver full moon, yes. It doesn't interest me to know where you live or how much money you have. I want to know if you can get up after a night of grief and despair, weary and bruised to the bone, and do what needs to be done to feed the children. It doesn't interest me to know who or how you came to be here. I want to know if you can stand in the center of the fire with me and not shrink back. It doesn't interest me where or what or with whom you've studied. I want to know what sustains you from the inside when all else falls away. I want to know if you can be alone with yourself and if you truly like the company you keep in the empty moments.
Thank you, Jodi.
Thank you, Louis.
Thank you for being revelatory. Thank you for inviting me in a little bit from a distance years ago, the TEDx thing. Thank you for being open, because a lot of us can't do that. So you're the surrogate in a lot of ways. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Thursday Night Life Music, and the music has been poetry. The music has been words. The music has been your words too. Ladies and gentlemen, let's think about on this. Let's be good to each other. Let's use compassion as our superpower, and I think we'll be okay.
I think so too. Thank you for asking me to do this, Louis.
Thank you, Jodi.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.